Welcome to News Inside. I'm An Jang-hyun. Let's meet our panelists. Professor Shin Sang-hyuk from Kyung University Graduate School of International Studies is back with us. And Dr. Bong Young-sik from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies is with us as well. Welcome back. North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UK recently defected to South Korea with his family. Tae Yong-ho is one of the highest-ranking diplomats in the North to escape the country in the midst of a wider trend of top officials fleeing the North.
태영호 공사가 부인, 자녀와 함께 대한민국에 입국하였습니다. 이들은 현재 정부의 보호하에 있으며
Socialism is not something in the air. Socialism is reality.
This defection is receiving a lot of attention not only because he's the highest-ranking diplomat so far to defect to the South, but also because Mr. Tae comes from a very elite family background.
Yeah, just look at the way that he makes speeches in front of TV cameras. He looked more like ambassador to UK from South Korea, given his very smooth, seasoned, and sophisticated manners. So I guess he represents the top crop of the North Korean elite class. As you know, that the North Korean population is categorized in three sectors. One is the core class, where Deputy Ambassador Tae belongs to. And in the middle class is a so-called wavering opportunistic class, and the rest is a hostile class, the descendants of the former adversaries and pro-Japanese ancestors. So his defection is indicative of growing discontent and anxiety among very top elite class in North Korea.
It's unclear exactly why he defected as of yet, but what may have been some of the contributing factors?
Well, it's a little bit early for us to the exact reasons why he defected to South Korea. We have to wait and see. But we can guess there are, several factors which can be the reasons why he defected to South Korea. First of all, the education of his kids. He has two kids, and then they were educated in the foreign countries. But certainly it was quite difficult for them to settle down in North Korea if they would return to North Korea. So maybe as a parent, it could be one of the reasons why he decided to defect to South Korea. And another one is actually he was in charge of the public relations of the North Korean embassy in the UK. He should have to defend the governing system in North Korea. But as we know very well, he has been the overseas Western countries like UK for a long time. So he is the person who knows problems the North Korean government has. Maybe it can be a little bit contradictory facts he faced. Maybe this can be another reason why he defected to South Korea. There could be several other causes and reasons for his defection to South Korea, but we have to wait and see.
We've actually been getting reports of quite a few high-profile defections in recent months. We're waiting for confirmation on some of those, but one of them includes a defection by a top official from North Korea's Reconnaissance Bureau. So how would you say these defections differ from those that occurred in the past?
There are several clear signs, considering the pattern of the recent defections from South Korea. One is that the Kim Jong-un regime does not seem to have decide on its own core power support group. If you look back the past history of North Korea under the leadership of Kim Il-sung and the leadership of Kim Jong-il, you have a certain pattern or the favored group inside North Korean government. Under Kim Il-sung, it was the so-called 발치산 group, the former guerrilla, comrades
who fought against the Japanese.
Fought against the Japanese, shoulder to shoulder to Kim Il-sung. And during the Kim Jong-il era, it was military officers under the doctrine of military first. but we do not see any clearly chosen favored group who will be the core support group for Kim Jong-un leadership. It is not really military officers, or it is not really party officials, or it is not really open-minded reformist, judging from the sudden prosecution of his uncle Jang Song-taek. So you don't see any pattern here. So I think Kim Jong-un leadership is still in a very early stage of consolidation in terms of not having the core support group. That is why you have a relatively wide range of defectors with very various backgrounds, from military officers, restaurant workers, and bureaucrats and technocrats. Only group that seems to have full support and endorsement from Kim Jong-un seems to be the engineers and scientists specialized in the development of
Weapons.
Missiles, yes.
Well, one common thread we may find, though, is that these defections are occurring in countries where these North Koreans are stationed for work, and in North Korean society, only the elite group of people get posted outside of North Korea to work.
Right, and there is a dual dimension of being elite group assigned to missions abroad. One is access to privilege and exclusive information about the outside world. So they are far more enlightened and informed about the gap between the propaganda of the government and the reality they have witnessed about the outside world. But at the same time, they are under additional pressure to meet the quota of sending so-called loyalty fund back to the central government. So it's a kind of double pressure on the elite working overseas to fight off the temptation to defect from North Korea.
So what kind of impact, if any, can we expect this type of defections to have on North Korea as a whole?
I believe that this is still a very early stage of the Kim Jong-un regimes to so-called settle down. Because as I said before, in response to the defections from North Korea, massive defection, even defection of the members belong to core elite group of North Korea, by and of itself, do not constitute the actual collapse of Kim Jong-un leadership. It should be regarded as a syndrome or symptom of crisis rather than the cause of it. So we have to wait and see to see more evidence that the defections or other so-called cracks of the system really indicating serious crisis of leadership.
Meanwhile, here in Korea, a foundation funded by the Japanese government to help support Korean sex slave victims has opened its doors following a settlement on the issue between Seoul and Tokyo back in December. With this, much of the agreement is now on track for implementation. Where does this leave Korea-Japan relations, and how should the two countries move forward?
Following a bilateral director-level meeting on August 9th, Korea and Japan's top diplomats held a phone conversation 3 days later, adding momentum to the implementation of an agreement on the issue of sexual slavery.
일본 정부로서도 작년 12월 합의에 따라 국내 절차가 완료되는 대로 정부 예산 10억 엔을 신속하게 출연하기로 결정하였다고 언급하였습니다.
Late last year, Seoul and Tokyo reached a deal on the so-called Comfort Women talks. The Japanese government promised to claim responsibility for its wartime abuses and provide 1 billion yen in contributions to a foundation set up for the sex slave victims. The agreement was considered a landmark settlement that would help the two countries start over. 7 months after the agreement, the so-called Reconciliation and Healing Foundation opened its doors in Seoul. But the possibility of conflict still lives on. Victims opposed to the agreement demand legal compensation instead of the creation of a foundation. The inaugural head of the foundation, Kim Tae-hyun, emphasized that the 1 billion yen contribution from Tokyo includes its acknowledgement of legal responsibility. The joint agreement has been called a historic deal for future relations by some, but implementation and further developments will need to be closely watched as they will have a lasting impact on Korea-Japan ties.
Though the Japanese foreign minister said that Japan would promptly transfer 1 billion yen or $9.5 million contribution to the Reconciliation and Healing Foundation. So how much progress have we seen so far in terms of implementing what was agreed upon back in December?
The fact that we can call this implementation is a clear evidence that both sides made a huge progress in terms of actually following through the December 28th agreement signed last year. So you may have some problems with the current stage of the negotiations to finalize the December 28th agreement. The fact that we are now talking about actual transfer of money, regardless of its characteristics or all the controversies about it, has to be accepted as a positive sign that both sides made a huge progress in the direction.
A lot of people want to know whether this precludes any future negotiations on the issue of sexual slavery with Japan.
The basic premise is that both sides is committed to make all the necessary effort to put an end to this unfortunate chapter, not only for South Koreans and their victims, but also Japanese in terms of their own understanding of a tumultuous recent past. The commitment still stays there, so being successful in implementing this hard negotiated agreement by both governments should remain as a focal point of the bilateral effort.
However, the Korean victims of sexual slavery say what they want isn't money or this foundation. Do you think perhaps their voices weren't reflected enough?
I don't think so. I mean, we have to pay attention to sayings and words of the victims of the sexual slavery. They said that the recent, the agreed Korean-Japanese accord on this issue has failed to include the official apology, I mean Japanese apology, and the formal indemnities, no legal compensations. So this is the big, the point which shows big differences between the government side and the victims of sexual slavery. Then we have to pay attention to why the victims of sexual slavery had those kind of thoughts, feelings, lack of communication. We have to pay attention to this point, which means that the government insists that we had enough discussion about this issue with the victims, but from the victims, that they said that no enough discussion. Some of them even denied that there were no discussion about this issue with government officials. So definitely, this point we have to consider with more serious approaches. And definitely the basic problem is as I said before, the victims of the sexual slavery do not accept the official Japanese apology, or they do not think that about the 1 billion yen, the money, seed money for the funds, cannot be regarded as the compensation or legal indemnities for the victims. So this is the basic differences between the government and the victims.
Now, Japan is calling for the removal of the symbolic girl statue, and there's speculation that Tokyo might use the 1 billion yen contribution as leverage on this issue. Do you think that might happen?
We have to wait and see. It is true that amongst the conservative members of the Abe government and the Japanese society, there was a very strong call to pressure the Abe government to tie the provision of the 1 billion yens in exchange for actual transportation of the statue away from the site of Japanese embassy building. But as of now, the Japanese government has not made any official request to South Korean government about the transfer of the statue. Although there are many incidents in which the members of the government actually voiced out the request, including the Vice Minister of the Cabinet, Mr. Hagiuda Koichi, made a statement in April that I do not want to imagine a scene in which we are doing the tape cutting ceremony for the healing, reconciliation and healing foundation in front of the statue. But we are only in the stage of negotiating the terms of the provision of the 1 billion yen and the establishment of the reconciliation and healing fund. So we do not need to get too ahead of the current situations to worry too much of what may be possible.
Another thorny issue between Korea and Japan is, of course, Dokdo. 10 Korean lawmakers visited the easternmost islets on Liberation Day, and this, of course, hit a nerve with Japan. Why do you think Japan gets so worked up about these events?
It has quite a long story, but I want to simplify the situation facing two countries. Dokdo is our territory, and then 10 lawmakers insist that this is the matter of sovereignty over the territory. So, as a lawmakers, we can visit a part of our country. But how about the response from the Japanese side? They said that no, they denounced Korean lawmakers for visiting part of the Korean, their territory. Dokdo, they think that Dokdo is belonging to the Japanese territory. From the Japanese perspective, they said that this is their territory, so they want to make this issue as one of the hard issues in not only in the relations with Korea, but also in the international arena.
So they're just trying to push the issue into spotlight.
Definitely. So this is the basic differences between two governments. And personally, I think that we are very good. In dealing with this issue. I think so far, the President Lee Myung-bak also visited to Dokdo, and Moon Jae-in, the leader of the opposition party, also visited to Dokdo very recently. Why not? I think I agree with the 10 lawmakers visiting Dokdo this time.
So next year will be Korea's presidential election year, so we'll see more politicians visiting Dokdo.
Perhaps, yes. And in the meantime, President Park Geun-hye, during her Liberation Day speech, emphasized the need to move forward for a future-oriented partnership with Japan. What do you think she had in mind?
Well, it is very interesting that she devoted only one line in the entire speech on the National Liberation Day regarding Korea-Japan relationship, which is a huge change, conspicuous by absence. And the second interesting point is that she urged forward-looking direction of the future partnership between the two countries. Why? I think there are two main reasons. One is that the need to consolidate and enhance the security cooperation between Korea and Japan in response to the growing threat of North Korean military has been part of reality that we can deny. And second, that the negotiations to carry out the December 28th agreement of last year is taking momentum. So from the standpoint of the South government, as emphasized by President herself, that it is time for us not to just focus on vague ideal situation, but accurate understanding of harsh reality, so that we will not do any disservice for the victims who actually need all the support and benefits.
Meanwhile, the heat this year, the blistering heat, has a lot of people struggling, with temperatures setting new records all over Korea. One big concern is the electricity bill that will come at the end of the summer, bringing to the fore the debate about the country's progressive power billing system.
Sweltering temperatures across the country have pushed up the usage of fans and air conditioners this summer, putting people on edge about their power bills. Especially thrown into the spotlight is the country's progressive power billing system for households. The system is based on 6 different rates, which rise according to the aggregate amount of electricity used. The highest rate currently stands at nearly 12 times the amount of the lowest. Not only that, a breakdown of power consumption trends last year shows that industrial use far surpassed household consumption. but the costs were at least 13% cheaper. In the face of growing calls for change, the government recently decided to temporarily ease the progressive rating system from July to September, in effect bringing down power costs by over 19% for each household. But consumers continue to point out the cut is a temporary solution and will not be able to fundamentally reflect changes in power consumption patterns. The ruling party and the government have agreed to draw up revisions to the current billing system and present it to the electricity regulatory body within the month.
The heat this year has been absolutely unbearable, but many households have been afraid to keep their ACs on for fear of racking up huge electricity bills. How have you managed?
Well, for me, I could not bear heat. So, look at me, I sweat a lot. So, but for me, I turn on the air conditioning system.
At the risk of having to pay a lot
whole day long.
At the end of the summer.
Yes, I have to sacrifice my financial burden to live decently.
Yeah, so for me it was like that as well. I couldn't think about tomorrow, the next week, or the next month. I had to survive the here and now.
I usually take my laptop computer and work in the cooled cafe with coffee.
Okay. So at the core of the problem is the progressive billing system. What angered a lot of people is the fact that the system only applies to household electricity use and not to commercial or industrial use. How big of a difference are we talking about?
It's very, very big. The government, has been criticized because of this unbalanced rates. And then the president had a meeting with the recently elected leader of the ruling party. At that meeting, Mr. Lee, who was elected as the leader of the ruling party, he suggested to consider the progress billing system reflecting the voices from the people. So the government announced the 3 months special discount, the plan. But it was not good enough, to make the complaint, those people who are complaining about the current system be satisfied. They got disappointed from the announcement of the government. So the basic thing is, the first one is that the system, progress billing system, is applied to only household, not industries and businesses.
And they end up using more electricity than average households, right?
Secondly, unacceptable, the big differences in the rates, the prices of the electricity usage. So these two things are the basic causes for the problem at the moment.
It turns out, compared to other OECD countries, Korean households don't use that much electricity. We only use about half of the OECD average?
Absolutely. Compared to the OECD average, average Korean households spend on the electricity every month about $26. And 223 kilowatt per hour, which is about 50% of the OECD average, which is 420 kilowatt per hour. And as you pointed out, that the household electricity only accounts for 13% of the entire electricity consumption in Korea. So you can say that households assume disproportional burden to pay the electricity bill. The big picture we can delineate from this controversy is that the old model of economic development that South Korea has been living with seems to be crumbling, as we witnessed from the previous controversy about making the labor market flexible with the labor law reforms that News Insight we used to discuss. The opposition side's argument is that okay, we can't really put trust, unconditional trust in the business, that what is going to good for business will good for the public interest and the interest of the employees. There is no guarantee to put unconditional trust in the government and companies. This model that exempts the corporations and agricultural sectors from the progressive electricity bill system while imposing the law-only household was based upon the principle that if the entire society makes sacrifices to support our enterprises so that they will do really well in international competition, eventually the benefits will be given back to the household. There'll be an ongoing mutual share of the interest. But in this national economy, that principle may not be sustainable under different circumstances. What is good for the companies may stay good for only companies without generating so-called trickle-down benefits for consumers or the employees. That is why the employees or household members demand that why only we need to make sacrifice, where there is a guarantee that our sacrifice that will benefit companies will come back to help us in the end.
But when this system was adopted firstly in 1974, the rate differences per unit was only 1.6 times. It was quite reasonable.
Between the different tiers, you mean?
Yes. But current system, it is 11.6 times. It's too big. And then, as Dr. Wong well pointed out, in 1974, to develop the economy, they should have to respect so-called the industrial activities or business activities. They put more priorities on the business and industrial activities rather than individual consumptions. But right now, everything has been changed. And then, to make matters worse, for the individual people, the rates differences are widened too much. So this is the basic problem. Point we are focusing on. So government should have to revise the current system. They have insisted that they will consider and then they will make some revision of this current system. But the opposition party and they insist very strongly that they should make a new law. So I think the opinions between the ruling party and the opposition party is very big, but they have to hurry to make a compromise in selecting or in making new policies, because that the victims of this dispute is the people.
Yes. Now, there are arguments that cheap electricity will only encourage people to be more wasteful, and that could in turn lead to environmental consequences and even the need to build more nuclear power plants. So I think an overhaul of the system is going to happen one way or another, but how do we strike the right balance so that the overhaul doesn't lead to electricity being wasted?
Well, first of all, the premise that cheaper electricity will make people engage in wasteful consumption. We have to be careful whether the correlation between the two is actually proven, right? Cheap electricity may bring more productivity of people. One example related to the current situation is Singapore. When Singapore was only taking off with its national economic development, the Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew's first action is to put air conditioners inside the government building, saying that all these government officials need to be in an optimal condition so that they will work really hard without being victimized by extremely sweltering weather of Singapore. So that actually worked. Diligent, hardworking government officials actually contributed to rapid economic development of Singapore. So cheap electricity may be very conducive to national economy. So cheap electricity equals more wasteful consumption. That might happen, but if it happens, then as you know that the electricity for a household only accounts for 13%. So the rest, 87% of the consumption will be used for economic activities anyway. So we don't have to engage in overblown concern about cheap electricity bill. And if the electricity bill continues to be a problem, then our response can be made in a productive way. Then there is also growing concern about environmental degradation. Then it might be an optimal time for us to be more aggressive in adopting solar panel system.
Alternative energy.
Alternative energy development.
Okay.
So.
Well, moving on, youth unemployment has emerged as one of the biggest challenges for the Korean economy, leading to a set of new support measures for job seekers from both the central government and Seoul City. Take a look.
The latest jobs report from July puts the number of unemployed youth at 419,000, according to the country's statistics office. At a time when people are most actively looking for work, youth unemployment remains stubbornly high, bringing into the limelight a number of measures designed to help support young job seekers in need. First was the Seoul City Government Support Fund for Youth.
그 취업의 문으로 오르지 못하는 지금 이 수십만 명의 지금 청년들이 있는데 이 사람들이 그 일자리, 취업이라든지 창업으로 이어질 수 있는 사다리를 우리가 만들어주겠다.
The city government announced it would select 3,000 recipients starting July and provide them with roughly $450 in subsidies for a maximum 6 months. Adding to the goal of the program is to provide job seekers with a better foundation for employment. And just last week, the government also announced measures to support the employment of young job seekers who have taken part in an employment program. The program entails a 3-step process that starts with employment counseling and job training, and concludes with job placement services.
저소득층의 약 30% 그리고 그 위에 청년의 약 10% 정도의 지원이 가능할 것 같습니다.
Both programs have received much attention for providing young job seekers with cash support. But the similarities between the two programs have also created some confusion and dispute. The Welfare Ministry has issued a correction order against Seoul City, claiming the support fund violates the Basic Social Security Act, and the city government is planning on filing for an injunction against the order with the country's Supreme Court. As concerns are on the rise about youth unemployment becoming a deeply rooted problem in Korean society, more discussions will take place to identify the best solutions.
So essentially, both programs are aimed at providing monetary support to young people as they go about looking for jobs. There was some debate over the specifics of these measures, but in the end, it just goes to show that the youth unemployment problem in Korea is quite serious at the moment.
Yes, it is. This is not only for a problem, not only for the Korean economy, but also the global economy as well. So on the part of government is quite burdensome. So as you know very well, maybe the Minister of Labor and Employment in Korea has operated so-called the Integrated Employment Promotion Program. It has 3 stages. At first stage, if I quote, they provided the intensive counseling services, and also they help the recipients to set up the individual job searching plan. During this training time, the government provided the 250,000 won per month, maximum. And at the second stage, the government provided vocational training to the recipients, and up to a maximum of 6 months. The recipient could get the training allowances, which is about 400,000 won. At the third stage, the government helped the recipients to get the job. So they provided the recruitment-related information to the recipient, and even one advice worker accompanied with the recipient to have the job interview. Well, according to the original plan, at this third stage, the government did not provide any cash allowances, but they changed it in response to the scheme suggested by the Seoul Metropolitan Government. They decided to provide about 200,000 won for the recipients to prepare the job interviews. Well, as you pointed out, basically, in terms of the cash allowances, both plans are same. But if I quote the government, they criticize the Seoul Metropolitan Government program because it cannot be a job promotion program, because the recipient can use the money for whatever they want to do. They provided actually 3,000 young job seekers with 500,000 won a month up to 6 months. So with the money, I mean, they can, do whatever they do.
Not necessarily spend it on job search. Right?
Yes. So if I quote the government, they said that this cannot be seen as the job promotion program. I mean, the scheme of program. So this is a basic program. But anyway, I personally, when I look at the details of these two programs, there are many things that are common. So the problem we have to focusing on is that, I mean, why they could not compromise? They could not
better coordinate.
Right. I mean, the government has one of the very important functions of the government is to coordinate the policies. Particularly, we have local autonomy system.
So you think the programs should be integrated somehow?
I think so. I mean, otherwise, I mean, we cannot expect the very fruitful outcomes.
Well, if the bottom line is to help unemployed youth to find jobs they like, because according to statistics that 8% of the young employees who finally got the job actually leave the job within a year. So if the focus is to help young, unemployed population, then the more option should be better.
I believe that similar programs have been offered in the past in European countries like France and Germany. How did they work out? And wouldn't the ultimate solution be just to create more jobs?
Well, if there's an ultimate solutions to help young unemployed population find jobs they really like to stay with, then we do not see the proliferation of all these problems, not only confined to Korea. France has a allocation problem, which is to help the housing situation for young unemployed people, and it also has NSEJ, the Youth New Service Occupational Policy. And notably, Germany has adopted since 2010 the Hartz IV policy, which is focused on not just providing temporary assistance to unemployed young population, but try to improve their qualification to find a job under the model that the best welfare policy for young unemployed people is to find them jobs. So I don't deny that jobs are the best solution. It's the best solutions to the unemployment, but reversely then everybody wants to have solid job. So it's a supply-demand dilemma.
And not all jobs are liked by everyone.
Not all jobs are like 33% of the jobs that was found by the Korean youth, thanks to the assistance provided by these programs, are temporary jobs. So it's not really a fundamental or permanent solution.
In fact, there are some differences between the government around an operating program and the program suggested by the Seoul Metropolitan Government. Actually, the government program to help the youth, and the people from the low income, the families, and the elderly. So it includes the more target groups than the Seoul Metropolitan Program. Well, as we discussed so far, the program suggested by the Seoul Metropolitan Government was tuned to only the youth.
19 to 29.
Yes, 19 to 29. That means I think there must be some area which can be coordinated, but lack of discussion, lack of negotiation, lack of efforts, I think I want to criticize this point.
Well, for now, I think we can only hope that any of these programs will be effective enough in solving the youth unemployment crisis. We have to wrap up. Your final thoughts?
Well, in fact, we just discussed about the coordination of policies between central government and local government. I think this will be very important. And this case will be a very valuable lessons for the future, the Korean, the policies.
Dr. Bong?
I saw the advertisement by the Seoul Metropolitan Government that let's give jobs to young people rather than just saying that you will get a job. So I think whether it's the central government's measure or the Seoul Metropolitan Government's policy, there should be something effective and solid for young unemployed population in this society to find jobs they like.
Well, thank you two very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
And that is all for this edition of News Inside. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more next week.